Welcome everyone to this 2021 federal election debate for the riding of Cambridge. We have today with us, we sent out invitations to all 5 candidates who are running in the riding, but we have today with us Michelle Braniff for the Green Party of Canada, Lauren Bruce for the New Democratic Party, and Brian May for the Liberal Party of Canada. The 2 candidates that did not make it were Connie Cody for the Conservative Party of Canada and Maggie Sagunas for the People's Party of Canada. I'm Mehreen Shahid, reporter with Cambridge Today, and I'm moderating today's debate in collaboration with Rogers TV crew. Before we begin, I'll quickly go through the rules and format of today's debate. Each candidate will start off with 1 minute for an introductory statement. That will be followed by a Q&A session, during which I will ask questions, and then each candidate will have a minute to respond. You may also have 30 seconds for any necessary rebuttals. Please watch the timekeeper for an indication of how much time you have left. Now, I will invite candidates to begin with their introductions through random selection. And first up, through random selection, we have Mr. Brian May for the Liberal Party of Canada.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and speak with everyone today. It's been my honor to serve as your Member of Parliament for the past 6 years. I'm a graduate of the University of Waterloo, and I've lived in Cambridge for nearly 20 years. And I'm running to build upon the progress that we've made. More than 300,000 children have been lifted out of poverty. We've invested heavily in building affordable homes in Cambridge. We've increased GIS for 900,000 seniors, lifting 57,000 out of poverty. The fact is that our economy is strong, poverty is declining, and our government has done more for the environment than any in Canadian history. But make no mistake, we are at a pivotal moment. Canadians need to finish the fight against COVID-19. We need a just recovery for everyone. We need to keep making progress on climate change, and we need to support families with $10 a day childcare. That's what I am fighting for. That's why I need your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brian May. Now we have Mr. Lauren Bruce with the New Democratic Party.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank Rogers for holding this debate because we know we've been having a challenge holding an election during a pandemic. Voting in this election is about challenging the way things are or accepting them. Liberal and conservative rule has brought us to this place. I have worked hard to raise issues such as universal pharmacare, electoral reform, improvements to the Canadian pension plan, raising the minimum wage, universal daycare, and paid sick leave, just to name a few. Canadians have overcome too much to believe this is the best we can do. Voting NDP means regular working families will have a voice and a party working for them. Together we can do more. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Now, Ms. Michelle Braniff for the Green Party of Canada.
Thanks very much. I'm glad to be here. I've had an eclectic career that makes me perfect to be your Member of Parliament. Lawyer, mediator, entrepreneur, social innovator in the nonprofit mental health sector. Currently, I teach social justice, social policy, and change at the college level. And I'm passionate about the Green Party because it's evidence-based policy and because it's green. All about the environment. We have a climate crisis. We need to be acting more quickly. It's urgent. Green for innovation, and green because we do politics differently. The old way, they prime a pump as if the economy is the engine, stand back, let things trickle down. Green Party does it like a garden, creating conditions for a sustainable, prosperous, green economy and resilient, healthy, equitable community. That's why everyone should vote green.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you very much, everyone, for your introductions. Now we're just going to jump into questions here. And I will read the question and then I will, again, one by one, invite all the candidates to speak. The first question is, the opioid crisis is a big concern for residents in your riding. What's your plan for tackling it? And I will start by inviting Lauren Bruce. Thank you.
Yes, the opioid crisis is something I think we should tackle just very much the same as we have the current pandemic. In 2011, I had the opportunity to visit the safe injection site in Vancouver. So, talking to the folks there and the healthcare professionals and how many lives they had saved. And I remember back then that was one of the first ones in Canada, and the Conservatives were trying to shut it down. So this is a real issue that we have to look at with compassion and with the supports necessary, and along with all the mental health issues that need to be addressed as well. It's just another example, extreme example of the cracks we've seen in our society during this pandemic. So whenever there's an economic downturn, quite often it's the downtrodden and those folks that suffer the most.
Thank you very much. Next, Michelle.
Well, I'm glad you called it an opioid crisis. It's actually a poisoning because it's all about contamination. People are not intentionally ingesting the fentanyl and other substances, and it's a health issue, and it needs to be treated as a health issue with that priority. It's one of the places where the vulnerability of our systems has really shown up because of the pandemic. So just like there were supply issues for almost everything else, the supply issues around the street drugs has caused more poisonings than ever. So it is urgent, it is a crisis, and we need to have health resources there. It's not a criminal justice issue.
Thank you very much. Ryan?
Thank you. In 2020, there were 6,214 opioid overdose deaths in Canada. Since 2015, the Liberal government has treated this as a health issue. We've been there investing over $600 million to support the provinces. We need to use evidence to do what works. We need to be comprehensive so that we can end this crisis. We will invest $25 million for public education to reduce the stigma associated with problematic substance abuse. We're going to invest an additional $500 million to support the provinces and territories in providing access to a full range of evidence-based treatment, and support the provinces and territories in creating standards for substance use treatment programs so that Canadians can access quality and evidence-based support where they need it the most. This is absolutely critical, not just for Canada, but for Cambridge specifically. We need to move forward. Doing nothing is not working.
Thank you very much. Any rebuttals at this point, candidates? You have 30 seconds if you do. All right, we will move to the next question. A second issue that comes up often among residents is housing and affordability. What are some concrete steps your party will take to address this? I will invite Michelle to start off this question.
So the Liberals made a good start, and they often make good starts. The Green Party would build and move more quickly. So the National Housing Strategy Act from 2017 declared that housing was a human right. It's really now what the Greens would call a national emergency. So one of the provisions in the legislation is federal housing advocate needs to happen now, and there needs to be major and increased investment in affordable nonprofit, cooperative, and supportive housing. So supportive housing is there's actually social service workers or social workers attached to permanent housing. The only supportive housing in Cambridge now is the second floor of the Bridges, which is crisis housing, not permanent housing. Elmira and Kitchener have some units with actual supportive housing. So we need to expand. Waterloo region as a whole is one of the parts of Canada that was most ready for the National Housing Strategy Act. We're among the top 5 in Canada, but of course that's not good enough. So the Green Party would have 50,000 units per year constructed over the next 10 years. We need deeply affordable housing available. And the Green Party is grassroots democracy, ready to listen. I've been sent lots of emails from votehousing.ca. It's recommendations, a policy platform based on research and recommendations, and lots of stuff there coincides with what the Green Party advocates, and other parts, absolutely, I endorsed it.
Thank you. And Brian, I have you next.
Thank you very much. And housing has been the cornerstone of the last 6 years of my career. We've worked really closely on the National Housing Strategy, and there's 2 very distinct issues here. There's building affordable housing, which, as Michelle already talked about in the National Housing Strategy from 2017, which Cambridge has benefited from, whether it be 175 Hespeler Road, whether it be the doubling of the size of the Kirkwood apartments in Ayr, millions spent on renovating co-ops in Cambridge, and of course the building of 195 Hespeler Road, which we're seeing great movement on. But I think really the question that you pose is more about making housing affordable, the rising costs of housing. And our platform addresses this incredibly well. We talk about creating a tax-free first home savings account for first-time home buyers that can save up to $40,000. We were talking about reducing costs for first-time buyers by doubling the tax credit from $5,000 to $10,000. We need to build more homes in Canada. We commit to supporting the build of 1.4 million new homes, and we need absolutely to start to curb this incredible growth we've seen over the last year and a half. We need to look at banning blind bidding, curb the speculation and housing flipping that we're seeing. We need to crack down on foreign speculation and stop the excessive profits and financialization of housing. There's significantly more in our platform in terms of detail on how we're going to do each of these things. There's a rent to own program that we're talking about and that's gotten a lot of attention. But these are 2 very distinct problems. One, on the affordable housing side, we've done an incredible job, and we need to keep moving forward with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a quick roundup of this. We're actually giving you 2 minutes to answer questions because it's just the 3 of you, and we would love to hear the bell if it's unmuted and then rung. Sorry, Lauren, go ahead.
It's a very important question. Housing has come up quite often when I'm talking to folks, but it's something we've seen coming. In my role as political action chair for the Waterloo Regional Labour Council, part of that role involves talking to all levels of government. And I believe it was 2015, 2014, somewhere around there, I was talking to the local mayors within Waterloo Region, and housing was at top of their agenda, an issue that they knew that we had to deal with. And unfortunately, now we've reached, like it's been said before, it's a crisis level. So the NDP has proposed not just a plan to make it easier for first-time home buyers, which is important, but also to eliminate the foreign speculators who treat our housing market like a stock market. And the other missing piece is that we're going to help renters. So I talked about this issue, but also from a personal level because I'm living that housing crisis. So my daughter is a young person, and her partner are trying to get into the market, and she's very concerned that she's been priced out. Doesn't a week go by where she doesn't call me frustrated about, putting a bid in and being outbid, or it's gone off the market before she even had a chance to look at it, or there's just nothing available. And she's been looking all over the region, but particularly here in Cambridge. and in my own personal situation where I was suddenly, unbeknownst to me, forced into a situation where I had to find somewhere else to live because I'm a renter, and it was unbelievably how difficult it was to find someplace on short order. The availability wasn't there. No vacancy after no vacancy after no vacancy, and the ones that were available, there was a waiting list, or it was just out of my price range. So not only do I hear you, see you when we're talking about the housing crisis, I'm one of you, and I get it.
Thank you very much. Yes, please, Michelle. You have 30 seconds.
So I just wanted to make it really, really clear that although buying a home or finding accommodation is important, the true crisis is affordable housing, where people's alternative is that they do not have secure housing, because you can't have a job and you really can't function in life unless you have housing. And we need to get very innovative about this. A really cool thing that is being experimented with are land trusts for affordable housing, and we need to explore these things.
Thank you. Any other candidate? All right. Now for question number 3. Through the pandemic, lack of affordable childcare has also come to the forefront. Please share what your party will do for Cambridge residents in this matter. And I will invite Brian May to begin. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. Prior to politics, I worked for organizations like the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club. I was very aware of the challenges, and still very aware of the challenges that childcare or lack of childcare and affordable childcare pose to families across this country. We had a plan for national childcare back in 2006. The Conservative Party decided to not move forward with that. They axed that almost immediately and did not support creating a single childcare space in that 10-year period. We absolutely believe that $10 a day childcare is not just an affordability issue. It's not just something that Canadians could use to bring down the cost of living. It's an economic issue. It is something that will help businesses have more employees, be able to have access to more employees. And we have already launched this. 8 provinces. We have 8 agreements with provinces and territories covering nearly half of children in Canada to deliver a 50% cut on childcare fees for next year and deliver $10 a day childcare in 5 years or less. I am calling out Doug Ford right here and now. We need to sign this immediately. People in Ontario cannot be left out of this program, and we need to make sure that that pressure is there so that, once this election is over, we can continue down that path. Conservatives have refused to commit to a reduction in childcare fees, refused to commit to new childcare spaces, which in Quebec, that is the big issue. It's about spaces. And we've refused to commit to hiring new childhood educators. We will be there to support families with this type of childcare. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lauren, you're next.
Well, it's interesting to hear that it's finally, well, we'll see. They're starting the process, because we've had the Quebec model for over 25 years, and we've seen how that works, how it helps women to get back into the workforce, how, yes, it is an economic driver. It's been part of our agenda. It's been part of our platform for over 20 years. I mean, we've been introducing it in the House, and it keeps getting voted down. Obviously, we're glad to see it finally come to fruition, but we need to make sure that it actually happens for all of Canadians. And here in Ontario, we've yet to see the commitment from the provincial government as stated. But I mean, again, it's part of our DNA when it comes to universal daycare, universal pharmacare, universal health care. That who the NDP is. So again, we're happy to see it roll out, but the details are the devil's in the details. So we've got to make sure they follow through with this commitment.
Thank you. Michelle, please go ahead.
So there's a level of consensus amongst the three of us here. So I wanted to emphasize how the Green Party is different and better. The Green Party is in favor of increasing the federal investment. It is an investment in the workplace and in children up to 1% of gross domestic product of federal funding. That is an international benchmark. Okay, Canada needs to catch up. There needs to be long-term, stable national funding. It needs to include an early childhood education component. That's an investment in the future. That is an issue of equity, because families that are pushed with 3 or 4 part-time jobs, the early childhood education helps their kids. And also there's the issue of equity. That education on Northern Reserves is not funded at the level of the rest of Canada. It should be, but the child care, the early childhood education, has got to start that way. And I just wanted to add one small item. Both of my son-in-laws are very heavily involved in childcare. It is not just a women's issue. It is an issue for the entire workforce.
Any rebuttals? Question number 4 then. Another matter that has come to the forefront is the lack of attention to elder care. We've all seen what happened in long-term care homes. So what would your party do about this issue? Lauren, you're up first.
Again, because of the work I've been doing in between elections, I've been a delegate to and a proponent for the Ontario Health Coalition. And it's part of the overall advocacy that we do on behalf of Ontarians when it comes to our healthcare system. Long-term care, we have been raising the alarms for years about the conditions. And we've been raising alarms about the for-profit model for years. I was personally embarrassed when they actually had to call in the armed forces. First of all, that they actually had to call in the armed forces, and then to find out the conditions that were happening. And we've seen the disproportionate effects on the two models, the for-profit and the public, when it comes to the effects on our seniors during this pandemic. No excuse for it whatsoever, the lack of inspections provincially. And I would very much like to see not just a national standards set in, but I would like to see long-term care become part of the Canada Health Act. Therefore, we would have a little bit more control on a federal level, because we've seen provinces in Quebec and Ontario and elsewhere where they've failed our seniors. If the model is, and I disagree with the approach of taking care of our seniors in these homes, primarily because we need to have home care and a lot of the other things I've been advocating for. But something has to be done, and we can't just rely on these for-profit centers to just to do it out of the good of their will, and to give them money to improve the circumstances of seniors is one thing, but they're also making profits off of it and paying their shareholders. So it is it's a black mark on our healthcare system, absolutely, and it needs to be dealt with.
Thank you very much for that. Michelle, go ahead.
So absolutely, long-term health care has been a long-standing issue. As far back as 2016, I've had students in my course focusing on long-term care and the policy changes they would recommend. So it was no surprise when the pandemic hit the way it did. It was tragic, because had those recommendations that my students were finding that were evidence-based, had they been implemented, it wouldn't have happened. We do need the Canada Health Act to include long-term care. We need national standards on long-term care. The the issue of staffing is particularly difficult and acute with respect to the for-profit. So the nonprofit are doing the staffing with a better model. So the issue, one of the issues is the level of funding, the way the staff are being paid. They're not being paid enough. They have several part-time jobs. That's why they were going from place to place during COVID. And the challenge with that is the mandatory training isn't happening because the staffing can't keep up long enough for people to get their training. So you've got this hugely important function, and there have been recommendations from lots of recommendations with medical associations for national standards dealing with the staffing, dealing with the model, and making sure that we take care of our most vulnerable citizens. We also need to have stay-at-home options bolstered so that people are able to stay at home. My mother-in-law passed away this week, and the family, one of the things we were grateful for was that she managed to stay at home, and she didn't go to long-term care, and that shouldn't be how Canadians think of long-term care.
Thank you, Michelle, and my condolences about your mother-in-law. Sorry to hear about that. And Brian.
Thank you, and if I can share my condolences as well, Michelle. That's I did not know that, and please, my best to you and your family. Look, we need to work with the provinces much closer than we have in the past. There's no doubt about that. The reality, and Lauren brought this up, the reality that the military had to be brought in to support long-term care facilities in both Ontario and Quebec was a shame for those two provinces. And you know, if you look at cuts that had been made in things like inspections leading up to the pandemic, there really shouldn't be a surprise to some of the things that we did see. But we're moving forward. We're going to work with the provinces to support seniors. We have a plan to spend over $9 billion to support safer conditions for seniors, improve the quality and availability of long-term care homes and beds. We're going to implement strict infection prevention and control measures, including through more provincial and territorial facility inspections for long-term care homes. We're going to develop a safe long-term care act collaboratively to ensure that seniors are guaranteed the care that they deserve, no matter where they live in Canada. And it has already been brought up about keeping people in their home and having them age in place. And that 86% of seniors want to age in place. And so we're going to raise wages for personal support workers, including a guaranteed minimum wage of at least $25 an hour. The fact that in this province, we have personal support workers going into homes doing this critical work, making just over minimum wage, not making a living wage, is not acceptable. We're going to train up to 50,000 new personal support workers, and we need to do this incredibly quickly to support our aging population. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any rebuttals? Lauren, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, just like to expand on what my friends have been talking about. Every year we have a ceremony for, it's called a day of mourning for workers that are injured or hurt in the workplace. And one of the most moving ones we had early on in the pandemic, we invited a speaker, and she was a PSW, a personal support worker, and whether she was unionized or not. And she was infected while she was at work. And she described the working conditions. And, Michelle was mentioning, going from place to place for work. Well, actually, they weren't allowed to during the pandemic. So even more stress on those folks. So it's very moving, important message we need to hear.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Yes, Brian, you have 30 seconds too.
Thank you. Just something that was brought up with regard to private long-term care. I think it's very important that we recognize that there are good private care homes in not just Canada, in this city. I've been to every single one of them. I've seen the care that is given. Yes, the majority of the ones that we had issues with were private care, and that's why we need to crack down on this. But I'm not in favor of painting them all with the same brush.
Thank you very much. And now we move on to question number 5. What are some steps your party plans on taking to advance the truth and reconciliation process? We have all those calls to action. When are we going to get to them? And we will begin with Michelle.
So this is an issue very important to me. Before 2008, when we had the Truth and Reconciliation started, I was an ally with settler Indigenous people trying to figure out how we could have a Truth and Reconciliation process in Canada. So if we had followed the Royal Commission report in 1996, we would have done a lot of the things that we needed to do. But better now, if we haven't done it in time. So in fact, the Green Party is in favor of adopting all of the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We need to act on this very quickly. We need to also the recommendations for the missing and murdered women and Indigenous girls, who correctly identified this as a genocide issue. UNDRIP needs to be implemented. I'm sure my friends won't disagree very much on those issues. There are also some outstanding Canadian Human Rights Tribunal cases. So the Indigenous child removal system, it began with residential schools. It continued with the 60s scoop, where Indigenous children were placed with settler families. It still continues now. And there is an outstanding Human Rights Tribunal case on that, because child welfare is not funded at the same level on Northern Reserves. So that means in the rest of Ontario, if a family is their neglect, child welfare works with them. Northern Reserves, they don't have the funding. Those kids are removed. They're not placed with kin. And there's an outstanding Human Rights Tribunal case on that. Still hasn't been finished. That needs to be looked after.
Thank you, Michelle. I have a quick follow-up for you on that. What would the Green Party's approach to the Catholic Church be? We've been seeing all of these missing kids, the graves, the unmarked graves that have been popping up. What's the approach?
So the challenge with the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, the United Church, they actually were part of the settlement funds that led to the Truth and Reconciliation. The Catholic Church is set up in such a way that although Pope runs the whole church around the world, each little diocese runs its own thing, and the local ones are bankrupt. I believe that some of the local cardinals and bishops have indicated that they would cooperate with church records. The Green Party is in favor of putting pressure on the Pope to have an audience and get his attention. I'm a lapsed Catholic, I'm not a Catholic anymore, and perhaps I have an inappropriate lack of faith in whether the Pope will do that or not. It needs to, I think it's important for the Canadians to ask, and I think we need to also work with the local Canadian church leaders who have said they will do what they can to get the paperwork out there.
Thank you. Brian, your answer.
Thank you. This is a critical issue during this campaign, but it's really been a critical issue for us since 2015, when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came out with its 94 calls to action. And right away in 2015, we committed to seeing them all through. I can say that 80% of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action involving the Government of Canada are now completed or well underway. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People is now law in Canada. We built or refurbished almost 200 schools on reservation in Canada, and we increased investment in Indigenous childcare and family services by $3 billion. We have an incredible responsibility to see these things through. Water is a massive problem in this issue. And I think I'm getting a bit shortchanged on my time here a little bit. I don't think I've already gone through 2 minutes, but I'll keep going just in case. Okay, apparently my time's up.
But I do have that follow-up question for you.
Sure. I think honestly, this has been something that we've heard a lot over the last number of months as these cases start to surface. We have to recognize how important this is, not just for Indigenous communities, but for all Canadians. Canadians need to reconcile with First Nations, not the other way around. We have put significant money towards the work that is needed, and we will continue to be there for First Nations that want to continue this work. Whether it be the discovery of these graves and making sure that they are brought home to where they are from. Each of these sites are being treated like a forensic archaeological dig, a criminal sort of site, a crime scene, if you will. The work is ongoing.
What about approaching the Catholic Church for an apology?
With regards to that, we did that. We did that in 2017. The Prime Minister spoke to the Pope at that time, asked very specifically for that apology. We didn't get it. We got an acknowledgement. The recommendation not only asks for an apology from the Church, but for a personal apology from the Pope on Canadian soil to First Nations. We're waiting for that. We are continuing to put pressure on the Church. And Michelle brings up the Cardinals, and some of them are supportive. They're divided in this country. They are not all supportive. And until they are, I'm not entirely certain that the Pope is going to provide that much needed apology.
Thank you very much. And Lauren, the floor is yours.
Yeah, one of the proudest days that I saw in the House of Commons as a New Democrat is when my friend and colleague Romeo Saganash presented and introduced the UN Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights. Romeo ran for leadership of our party. I got to know him quite well, and he was a survivor of a residential school. So when this was coming from the heart, obviously, and when he tells a story, you cannot help but be moved. So obviously we are in full support of all the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations, and we'll make sure that they happen. We need to change the rules when it comes to child welfare to give Indigenous peoples control over that area. I still can't believe it's 2021 and we're still talking about drinking water on reserves and remote areas. I just don't fathom how that is still an issue. And I find it a little difficult that up until recently, due to an out-of-court settlement, while we're talking about reconciliation with First Nations, the federal government was still in court fighting them. So that's kind of a hard pill to swallow when you're talking to people and telling them that we're partners or we're equals, and meanwhile you're in court fighting them. So. And when it comes to, you're going to do the follow-up about the unmarked graves because, I realize that there's legislative hurdles and there's bureaucracy that how these things might work, but I believe that we need to treat this as a prosecutorial matter. I believe that we should be treating this as a crime, and I think we should be holding those account as much as we can up until the present and in the past, and that would give us the ability, or at least give the ability for our Indigenous friends access to the records when it comes to the church and when it comes to government records, because they were both involved in this. So, and like I said, I know there's hurdles to jump through, but I think we need to give the tools to a prosecutor, a special prosecutor's office, to treat this as a crime. Because it definitely was, and the only reason my brothers and sisters are going to get some sort of closure is if we treat it with such and respect their need to come to some reconciliation over this.
Thank you. Yes. Brian, you have 30 seconds and then I'll come to you, Michelle.
Thank you. I want to just rebut two things. So for Lauren, 100% of the documents within the government documents have actually been given to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That was done a very long time ago. Specifically on water, we've invested over $4 billion on 530 water infrastructure projects, including 99 new plants and 436 upgrades. We've actually lifted 109 boil water advisories in this country. What I really do not understand is how the NDP leader can continuously say we've done nothing in this area. We've actually absolutely done a ton in this area, and we're going to make sure we get it all completed.
Thank you. Michelle.
So on the water, what has happened is, and yes, thank you, investment in water treatment plants. There needs to be steady, stable, and increased funding for infrastructure on reserves at a parity to the per capita for municipalities. So as close as 6 nations, they've got the water treatment plant, but 89% of the homes do not have water they can drink without boiling.
Lauren,
I
do
did
you
have
have
more to say about that. Can you ask another question about reconciliation?
Lauren, do you have anything to come back?
The government response is we've done so much, but you haven't done enough. It's still an issue. It's 2021. If you
The commitment is to have it done by 2025, and we're still on track to do that.
well, the past commitment, Brian, was we were going to get it done, and then the minister had come out and say, "Well, sorry, we're not going to quite get there."
I'm saying your leader is saying that we've done nothing. Clearly, that is a lie.
Well, I'm telling you, we haven't done enough.
We are going to get to another contentious issue now, which is climate change. It's been on everybody's mind. But my question to you all is, what upgrades to infrastructure does your party propose to help cities prone to flooding, like Cambridge? How do you propose to make them more resilient in the face of climate change? And we will begin with Brian.
Thank you for this question. We were very lucky, the three of us, to be on an entire debate last night on climate change, and spoke heavily about each of our party's platforms. And I think we agree more than we disagree on this one. We know that climate change is real. At least the three parties that are represented here know that climate change is real. And this is a crisis. We have to act. We need to move forward. We need to make sure that we continue down this path that we've started. There's no government in the history of this country that's done more for climate change than this government. In terms of dealing with the changing weather, harsh weather, the flooding, the fires, absolutely. We need to make sure that not only the provinces, but municipalities have the resources they need to fight these things. Things like Grand River Conservation Authority. I've been very proud of the support that we've been able to provide them over the years to do the work that they're doing. We don't see the floods in Cambridge that we used to see because of the work that they do and the science behind what they do. So that's critically important. Infrastructure is going to be absolutely critical moving forward, whether it be flood mitigation, whether it be supporting the wildfire issues. We're looking to hire 1,000 new firefighters to fight the growing number of wildfires we see in Canada. And all of this is part of what I believe and what many in the scientific world believe is the best plan right now to move forward on climate change. Former Green leader in BC has endorsed our platform. We know that we're on the right track, and we know we have the plan in place to get it done.
Thank you very much. Lauren, your turn.
Yep, it's obviously it's an overriding issue that sort of drowns out a lot of things when we look at the big picture of scheme of things and all the ramifications of the climate crisis and how it impacts people's lives. I think Canadians have been particularly noticing this summer, where we have obviously the fires in British Columbia. We also have a historic drought in the prairies, and even things like a super hurricane that hits the Gulf Coast in the States, which actually affects our energy prices. So, Canadians are feeling the effect from something that might not happen locally, but they're also being directly affected. When we talk about food security with our farmers out west. Unfortunately, if we look at, say, the last 30, 40 years, that we know this has been going on, but, successive conservative and liberal governments have been talking about doing something, but, we just haven't seen a reduction. We haven't hit any of the targets put forward by either of those governments in the last 30, 40 years, right? So it's one thing to say something, but it's something to actually get something done. So we've been raising the red flag on this one for decades, and we need to take this to the serious level that it really needs to happen. We need to involve every aspects of society, whether it's corporate Canada, whether it's government, federal, provincial, municipal. We've all got a hands in this. And originally you were talking about what I would call mitigation. So we have to work hand in hand with our municipalities when we're talking about the physical infrastructure and whatnot, to help them mitigate, because these disasters and these crises are coming our way. We see it with the more storms and the flooding. Look at New York City from the hurricane, and then some of our pals on the East Coast. And we've seen past examples of this in Alberta and here in Ontario and Quebec. So it's widespread, and time's up.
Thank you. Michelle, go ahead.
So I think all three parties here are in agreement. The other two parties really aren't. So that's important. I'm going to say the Liberals are not doing enough for the strong action we need for climate adaptation. I know Justin wasn't ready when he became Prime Minister, so maybe that's why he's not moving fast enough. But to differentiate more funding, so the Green parties currently, the municipalities get 10.8% of all taxes. That's enough for all that they have to do. So the Green Party would take the gas tax fund, make it a permanent municipal fund for federal transfers, and then double the funding, and also increase in investment in innovation, so we can accelerate that to be strong on adaptation. So far, the way the walls are around the Grand River have held, but we're looking at more and more climate change. So we have to continue to invest. We have to continue to do that. We need to protect old growth forests. So the Fairy Creek blockade is in Vancouver Island. So it's British Columbia, but it's also, we need a national policy to protect old growth forests. We've got the RCMP who are funded in a combat gear, going up against elders, Indigenous people, and their environmental allies. It's not good for reconciliation. And once those trees are down, they're no longer going to be doing the work they need on carbon sequestration, whatever, and protecting us from fire. So we need to do more, and we need to invest more.
Yes, Brian, I suspected you might have something to say. You have 30 seconds.
Just to be clear, I and the Liberal Party absolutely agree that we need to do more. But again, we're talking about what we inherited in 2015. We were on a path to be 12%, emissions to be 12% higher in 2030 compared to the 2005 numbers. Currently, the CO2 emissions are projected to be 36% lower in 2030 than 2005. And we've invested $100 billion to fight climate change and build a green economy, including $53.6 billion in this green recovery.
Lauren or Michelle, do you have anything to add to that? Go ahead, Michelle, and then I'll come to you, Lauren.
So I was answering your question on climate adaptation. I think in terms of the cuts and the targets, that is an entirely different issue. I don't know if you have a question about that or not, but going to say that the Green Party wants that green recovery plan to be much more aggressive. We say net negative by 2050. And that actually makes sense on the evidence.
Thank you. Lauren.
Yeah, I'm trying to balance, what Liberal government's been saying, because they're saying that we're doing all of this, all these policies and legislation when it comes to climate change and reactions, but at the same time as they're still subsidizing the fossil fuel industry. They still bought a pipeline. The Prime Minister goes to Europe and says we're back, and then spends, and it's our tax dollars, and spends billions on a pipeline. How do you balance those two messages?
Brian, what would you like to say to that?
Well, look, I think that what the NDP considered a subsidy is what the question is. If your leader is talking about things like the wage subsidy from this pandemic being a climate or an oil and gas subsidy, protecting those jobs, one of the subsidies is supporting diesel in the high north for First Nations people. He wants us to cut those. We have to move forward in a responsible way. And that's what this plan does. And that's what all the experts are telling us is the way to do this.
Thank you very much. We are going to move on to the next question, which is our favorite question. It's about vaccines. We've already done a lot about vaccines, but what would your government have done differently, or what would your government do differently about this? And I'm going to begin with Brian.
Thank you. Look, I'm very, very proud of the COVID response from our government. We, at the beginning of this pandemic, and as vaccines became more and more of a viable option, we secured the largest portfolio of any country on the planet for vaccines. We have now surpassed even Israel in terms of number of people that have been vaccinated in Canada. We had our own timetable to say we'd have enough vaccines by the end of September. We were able to bump that up, given the procurement of vaccines, 2 whole months to the middle of July. So I think our role in terms of vaccines was procurement. We made sure the provinces never were without the vaccines. They had more vaccines at any given time than they could get out and get into arms. But I want to take a moment to thank Canadians. This has been an incredibly challenging year and a half. And governments at all levels can do all the work that they can. They can spend the money. They can do the rollout. But if Canadians didn't roll up their sleeves, if Canadians didn't stand up and do what they needed to do to make not just themselves, but their families and everybody around them, their coworkers, their neighbors safe, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I think we need to continue to move forward. We need to continue to educate. We need to continue to recognize that there are still a number of people in our communities that, and I've talked to many of them. I saw a lot of them face to face a week and a bit ago at the protest that when the Prime Minister came to Cambridge. We need to reach out to those people, and we need to make sure they have the facts, because clearly they do not. Clearly they have a perception of what this is, and I think we need to continue to move forward to get everybody in Canada vaccinated so that we can have a true recovery.
Thank you very much. Lauren, you're up next.
I have a little bit of a different perspective on this than maybe some of my panelists. I am a frontline worker that provides essential services. So I've been working for Zared for 35 years. And I can tell you that when the province declared a state of emergency, I was already raising flags before that, but as soon as that statement went out, we were completely overrun. I mean, most everybody shops in a grocery store and knows what that was like, where there was thousands upon thousands of people, and we ran out of bathroom tissue, bottled water, you name it. So we saw the supply chain wasn't able to. Here we are, one of the richest countries in the world, and we were having problems stocking the shelves. I mean, part of that was staffing issues, logistical issues when it comes to warehousing and transportation and whatnot. That's more getting in deep in the weeds. But the question I kept raising was, we've already had a SARS outbreak. We know that in an emergency like this, the grocery stores and pharmacies will be the only ones left open. What's the plan? And I didn't get a response. How are we going to protect our people that are working during this? Our people are scared.
So what would your party's plan be?
Well, that we need to pay attention to when events like SARS happens, or when we finally get out of this, and I think it's going to be a while out of the COVID, that we pay attention to the review and understand that we have PPP stockpiles, so that like I said, no matter what the emergency is, a grocery store is going to open. So why not have a stockpile of PPE and protective equipment for those workers? Because if like I said, they're going to be open. Maybe nothing else will be, but they will be. So why didn't you have the stockpile? Why wasn't it sitting there? So the government can play a role for these large companies to have that stockpile, so they're not caught saying, well, we're not sure. And trust me, early on I was getting answers like, well, it's a PR thing. We don't want people to think that our employees are sick. And I'm saying they need to be protected. I'm sorry, no shirt, no shoes, no mask.
All right, Michelle, go ahead, please.
So Lauren, thank you. Thank you to all the frontline staff who have been there. And I got to say that I think Canada did do a good job. I not perfect, but it was an emergency. I was about, I think in 2019 at an exercise on emergency preparedness in Waterloo region. So there was a level of preparedness at the municipal level. I loved the way all the parties work together across party lines. We can do that for the climate. We can do that for other things. And that we had collaboration across the provinces. Even Ontario with the federal government, we got through it. It was ugly. It was scary. It was messy, but we did the best we could. I think there are things we can learn going forward. Okay, so I'm not saying, we're going to be better than that tomorrow. I don't believe that this pandemic is the last. So we need to be prepared for other unexpected pandemics. I am a little bit shaken and afraid that the mutations will continue to be more contagious and more so we need the investment in research. We have discovered that we need to have the supply chains and the manufacturers in Canada. These are just things we have learned, and we need to go forward with that. And the last thing I want to say, so I was double vaccinated so early, and I'm at such an age that I'm double AstraZeneca. Okay, early adopter, big supporter of public health. We need to make sure public health is well funded. We need to have more funding for primary health care in the communities for the family doctors. But we need to not just rely on the passport system. It's great. It's helped the vaccine hesitant. We need to keep everyone safe. The vaccine are not ready to change yet.
Lauren, I'm afraid we're very close to to wrapping this up now, so I'm going to invite you all to make your closing statements, beginning actually with you, Lauren.
Okay, well, I wanted to add that, when we talk about a vaccine passport and whatnot, it's designed for non-essential businesses. So when you're talking, because I represent the workers in grocery stores, they're essential. So there's no requirement to go into those locations. And because we have the highest volume of the general public coming in weekly, our folks are exposed, right? So anyways, so does that enter into my time at all? So I'll try and
go ahead. You have 1 minute now.
Okay. My friends, time after time, under liberal or conservative governments, we have seen those of us who are racialized, women, folks living paycheck to paycheck, or working precarious jobs bear the brunt during a pandemic or an economic downturn. The ultra-rich and those who have profited during this pandemic should pay their fair share. This election gives us the opportunity to do things differently. As my political hero, Jack Layton, told me over 10 years ago, he said, Lauren, don't let them tell you it can't be done. Together, we can change the world.
Thank you very much. Brian, please go ahead.
Thank you all for joining us today. Your vote matters. Just look at the past 2 years and the role of the federal government in getting people through COVID-19, procuring vaccines, protecting your job, and ensuring that Canadians have had enough food on the table. While others were advocating for austerity or against masks or against vaccinations or against helping those who needed it, we were fighting for you. We had your back and we still do. If you care about our community and you don't want us to see us slide into the old playbook of cuts, unaffordable childcare, and neglecting housing issues, I need your support. Putting Canadians' health and safety first, building homes, ending profiteering and unfair speculation, supporting families with $10 a day childcare, fighting climate change, and leaving a safe and healthy environment for our grandchildren. Let's build back better together. And that's why I need your vote. That's why I need your support on September 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Michelle, you go ahead.
This is the third time I've run, and more than ever, Cambridge needs a green voice in Parliament. There's the issue of climate. There are justice issues. The Green Party has practical, evidence-based policies, and we follow true accounting principles. So a lot of time you'll hear the conversation as if there's only an income statement, and that's what gets tracked, the revenue and the expenditures. But in fact, we need to talk about the balance sheet, and the government needs to pay attention to infrastructure, especially on the reserves, and not just the physical, but also in like rail and transit, but also investing in people. The Green Party in Parliament is this tiny little yeast that keeps things going. Do not be afraid of a minority government. Some of the best Canadian decisions have been made with minority governments. And you know, I know you love Brian May, but maybe not so much Justin Trudeau. Go Green.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I'd like to thank all the candidates that made it out today. Thanks also to Rogers TV and CambridgeToday.ca for bringing the candidates around the table. We hope you will all get out and vote, whether it's through advanced polls or on September 20. You can watch local results via Rogers TV. Transmission begins at 9:30 p.m. on election day, or head to CambridgeToday.ca for in-depth local reporting on the results and follow-up. Take care and have a good day.